Well, good morning. It's good to be with you. I bring you greetings from the Southern California, Nevada Conference of the United Church of Christ. Hello. Where I serve as a consulting minister for racial justice, equity, and inclusion. So I'm grateful to be here with you all this morning. Today we're talking about miracles. We're talking about the miracle of the loaves and fish. I'm guessing most of us are familiar, have heard this miracle story before. Yep, it's tried and true. This story, and along with a very similar story, shows up 6 times in the Bible. One version appears in all 4 Gospels. It's the only miracle story to show up in all 4 Gospels. That's the version we're looking at today, with 5 loaves, 2 fish, and over 5,000 people. And then there's a second version, another version, that gets added to both the Gospels of Matthew and Mark. So Matthew and Mark have 2 versions each, with different amounts of loaves and fish and people. So overall, this story shows up 6 times. Even if you've gone to church for just a few years, odds are you've heard at least one version of this story. I'm seeing some head nods. I think the story gets told so often for several reasons. First, it's easy to remember. Hungry people, Jesus, bread, fish. A simple setup with a simple ending. Second, the point of the story is clear. When there's not enough food to go around, Jesus provides. Jesus provides with enough for leftovers for doggy bags. We can easily take the message we've heard on a Sunday and remember it during the week. When we think we don't have enough, God provides. God provides more than we expected. I think another reason the loaves and fishes story is told so often is that it is a miracle we can actually understand. We can actually kind of make sense of it. Many of us have been to a potluck where at the start of the gathering, there didn't seem to be enough food, but by the end, somehow there was a bounty of food with enough for leftovers, enough that everyone can have 3 desserts, and there's still leftovers for people to take home. And we leave the gathering giddy with a sugar high and grateful for the gathering that we've had. The story of the loaves and the fish is a miracle we can relate to. It's not like the miracle stories when Jesus walks on water. How do we explain that? Or when Jesus turns water into wine, or when Jesus resurrects Lazarus from the dead. We can find meaning in those stories, but we don't understand them the way we do the story of the loaves and the fish. For this story, we can come up with a reasonable explanation. The people who came to hear Jesus brought their own food. And at dinner time, in addition to the 5 loaves and 2 fish, they shared the food that they had brought like a potluck. Because we can make sense of the story, we can find comfort, knowing how it might have happened in real life. Unfortunately, I don't think comfort is the main point of this story. I don't think we're supposed to fully figure out how it might have happened. Some parts of the Bible are meant to comfort. Think of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Miracle stories can offer us comfort. Think of the joy of Mary and Martha seeing their brother brought back to life and what comfort they had. But a miracle story's main purpose, I think, is to shock us, is to wake us up, to make us aware and feel deeply in our soul the power of the divine to transform the world. I think that those of us, and I'm in this group, who've been coming to church for a while have gotten too comfortable with the story of the loaves and fish. Of course, I understand people wanting to find comfort in church. So much of our world outside is discomforting, unsettling, and frankly, disturbing. Global climate change, gun violence, politics that are less and less about respecting other human beings' lives, the pandemic, which thankfully seems to be over for now, but if we're honest, we haven't fully grieved the losses we've suffered, including our society having lost the value of appreciation for gathering in person, together in community. We haven't fully grieved that loss. So we need a space for comfort, at least on Sunday morning, at least for 1 hour, 1 day a week, where we can find comfort, peace, solace, where we can not only find peace, but we can practice peace and be with other people who want peace and who are willing to practice peace together. At least for 1 hour, 1 day a week. As a consultant, I visit congregations around Southern California. I hear the same questions. How do we bring people back to church? How do we attract new members? How do we welcome more people from our neighborhood to church? And then on a deeper level, I hear, how do we tell people outside the church that we welcome everyone? We welcome everyone, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, LGBTQ+ people. How do we make clear to people outside the church that we respect science, that we care about truth, that we are not like people who claim the identity Christian and then use the media and the legal system to spread hate and violence? How can we claim our identity as Christian in a society where Christian has almost become a bad word? Now, I realize that not everyone here identifies as Christian. That's true of most churches I visit. Rather than Christian, I've been saying church-goers, because whatever your faith tradition, including if you have no faith tradition, you are here in a church, and so you do go to church. The reality is, I wouldn't need to say churchgoers if Christian hadn't become such a polarizing word. How might the church reclaim its identity as Christian? I believe the church simply needs to proclaim the truth of Jesus Christ. The truth of Jesus Christ. You don't have to be Christian or even a churchgoer to know in your heart the truth of Jesus Christ. How would you describe the truth of Jesus Christ? Love, compassion, welcoming the stranger, welcome for everyone, anyone, feeding those who are hungry, comforting those who are sick, all of that. The truth of Jesus Christ also goes deeper. It's also about challenging the status quo. It's about love, yes, loving each other one-to-one and in community, but it is also about reimagining a world where more people can love more people. Reimagining a world where we rebuild all the places in our world where hate and fear and doubt are in control, where love hasn't yet had a chance to thrive. Proclaiming the truth of divine love is not always easy, as you can imagine. Sometimes it is easy. You're in line at the supermarket and you start talking with the person in front of you in line, and somehow they end up telling you that their father is not doing well. And then you tell them about when your father got sick. And you've somehow made a connection, even just for a few minutes waiting in line. Sometimes the truth of love shows up, and it is easy. Sometimes, a lot of times, it is not so easy. Most times, in fact, it is hard work to challenge the status quo. It's hard work to challenge and rebuild places where hate and fear and doubt are in control. If the church is to reclaim its identity as Christian, if the church is to proclaim the truth of divine love, if it, and by it I mean we, if we are to do this hard work together, then we must be willing to create spaces where the main point is not comfort. So much of this work is not about comfort. Jesus warned his disciples that the work of love would not always be easy. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that you completely change up your Sunday morning, that you take away your community's 1 hour, once a week space of peace and solace. This space, as you all know, is a blessing, a true gift, a true spiritual resource to support you as you figure out how to proclaim the truth of divine love. If you are to do this work, though, you must be willing to create spaces, maybe not on a Sunday morning, where the main point is not comfort. So how might you do that? Well, the good news is that we've already started in the course of the sermon. We've already been laying seeds on how to go about doing that. There's no one answer for this church, or for any church. There may be several different ways that you choose to proclaim the truth of divine love in the world. So I don't have answers to offer you. Instead, here are some thoughts, some ideas, some morsels, some chunks of bread, of those loaves, for you to chew on. There are 3 of them. Chunk of bread number 1, expect to experience discomfort. Expect to experience discomfort. Challenging the status quo means change. And as I say that out loud, I know that that is a very scary word, change, but it means change. In this community, think of discomfort as an add-on. Rather than replacing comfort with discomfort, what if you keep your sacred spaces and then add on new, different spaces to do this work, which can include discomfort? Chunk of bread number 2, build spaces outside of Sunday worship. I think a lot of churches are getting stuck on questions like, how do we attract new members? Because they mistakenly believe that Sunday morning worship is the only or the primary space that counts when it comes to membership. What would happen if, when we ask the question, how do we attract new members to church, if we expand the definition of church to include everything offered by the congregation, whether on Sunday or not, whether in the sanctuary or not, whether on church property or not. If, in asking the question, how do we attract new people to church, if we expand our definition of church, what new possibilities might there be for us? In the context of racial justice work, I highly recommend doing that work outside of Sunday morning worship. That's chunk of bread number 2. Build spaces outside of Sunday worship. And here's chunk of bread number 3. The first 2 were actually pretty tangible. They're kind of things you could put into practice right now. But the third one, as a warning, is not so tangible. It's less of a chunk of bread and more like the smell of a chunk of bread. Open your heart to miracles. Open your heart to miracles. Think about it. The movement that Jesus and the disciples started, their movement of divine love that is still alive today, 2,000 years later, that movement got its start because of miracles. People heard that a man was walking on water, that he was raising people from the dead, and they came because they wanted to see him. And when they arrived, Jesus taught them, and they learned the truth of divine love. I told you it was not as tangible as the first 2. To be honest, I don't know how a church might use miracles to advance its ministries in the world. Maybe you have some ideas, and I'd love to hear them. But I do know that the path for a community to believe in miracles begins with individuals in the community believing in miracles. Remember, a miracle is something that happens in our everyday world that can't be explained by everyday human power or what happens in nature on an everyday basis. Have you ever experienced a miracle? Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to share out loud. Maybe it had something to do with health, or with money, or a new job. Maybe it was an experience in nature. Maybe it was something to do around the passing of a loved one. Think about what happened. Where were you? How old were you? And what happened? And what meaning have you made out of that experience? Earlier in the children's chat, I shared a story about a recent miracle that I experienced. And here's more of the backstory. I moved to Southern California because my husband grew up here. So we moved to live in his house in Pasadena, where he lived. He had owned that house for over 20 years. And so when I was saying hello to those birds, I didn't know many people in Pasadena. Those birds were a true resource for me of comfort and peace, especially as I was in a marriage that I would later realize was not a healthy fit for me. And so when I decided that it was not the right fit for me the long term, I separated from my husband and I moved to Long Beach. And in Long Beach, I knew even fewer people than I did in Pasadena. And so you can understand my longing to connect with those parrots in Long Beach. And you can understand the power that I felt when I heard that scratching and looked into the eye of that parrot. Open your eyes to what miracles may be in store for you. Open your ears to what miracles may be squawking your way. Open your heart to see what miracles this world may have in store for you. Let's close with the same prayer that closed the children's chat. And if you'd like to pray, repeat after me, please do so. Dear God, thank you for opening my heart to the possibility that a miracle can happen to me. Amen.